The only thing better than a meatball is a loaded meatball in a delicious, homemade, from-scratch tomato sauce. If you're looking for a hearty and delicious comfort food that'll please young and old alike, well, stay tuned. Welcome to the Sauce and Gravy channel. This is Johnny Mac, and get ready for our comfort food classic, spaghetti and meatballs. Not just ordinary meatballs, loaded meatballs. Buckle up, let's go. Alright, so let's begin this comfort food classic. You can't go wrong with this spaghetti and meatballs. We're going to start off with the meatballs. Grab 3 slices of bread and remove the crust. Spaghetti and meatballs is a comfort food classic, and it's definitely a hit at my house. So this is how I like to do it. I like to make loaded meatballs, and really to get that loaded meatball nice and moist, this step with the bread, it is the way to go. This is going to kind of infuse a little bit of moisture. We're going to slice and dice this bread up, and then once we've got it all sliced and diced, we're going to put it into a nice bowl, and then we're going to add a little bit of cream. And I always like to start off with the meatballs. I like to saute them in a pan. That leaves a nice fond in that pan for a delicious tomato sauce. To moisten the breadcrumbs, I'm using 2/3 of a cup of heavy cream or 167 milliliters. If you don't have heavy cream, it's perfectly fine to use regular milk. But I do like to use heavy cream. I find that it brings a little bit more of a richer touch to the meatballs, and it makes it a little bit more juicier. It just holds that moisture a little bit better. Now for the next ingredient for this loaded meatball, I'm going to use 1 yellow onion, roughly about 180 grams, and 4 cloves of garlic. I like my meatballs chunky, so I just mince the onions and the garlic. However, you can use a grater and grate them down into a nice fine paste if you like, or you can take these, mince them, and then saute them if you prefer. Just whatever you like to do, taster's choice. For this from scratch homemade meatball recipe, grab some flat leaf Italian parsley. We're going to use 1 bunch. This is going to go in both the meatballs as well as our tomato sauce that we're going to make here in a little bit. Make sure that you wash it, make sure that you dry it, and then chop it up really well, nice and fine. And I like to add a little bit of Parmesan Reggiano to my meatballs. We're going to put in 1/4 of a cup or 13 grams. I like to use the block of Parmesan. If you don't have a block of Parmesan, it's perfectly fine to use the store-bought pre-grated Parmesan, no problem. It'll always add a little bit of flavor, and flavor is what we're looking for. Okay, so that puts the finishing touches on the prep work. Now it's time to grab a mixing bowl and throw everything together for these meatballs. So we'll start off with some sweet Italian sausage, 1 pound, and some ground beef, 1 pound, 453 grams apiece. Throw them on in. And for the ground beef, I'm using 93% lean ground beef. Now it's time to add the breadcrumbs. Do not wring out the cream. Keep it in there. You keep that cream in the breadcrumbs. Try to plop it all in there as best as you can. You want these meatballs to be super moist. And for my homemade spaghetti and meatball sauce, I like to load up my meatballs. I'm going to load it up with the 4 minced cloves of garlic and 1 large onion. And I like that power-packed flavor of garlic, so I'm keeping the garlic raw. However, you can saute it to tone it down, the garlic. You can even saute the onions if you'd like to add another dimension of flavor. And then goes in the Parmesan, 1/4 of a cup of Parmesan Reggiano or 13 grams. Next, we'll throw in a little bit of salt and pepper, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. Grab some of that flat leaf parsley that we chopped up. We're going to put in 1 cup. Just make sure that you still have some remaining for that delicious tomato sauce that we're going to make in a little bit. And last but not least, our binding agent to keep those meatballs nice and firm and together, 1 egg. Alright, so now it's the fun part. Dig those hands in, get them really dirty. Mix this meatball mixture up really well. We want each meatball to be loaded with all of the ingredients. So this is going to make about 20 loaded meatballs, about the size of golf balls, or about 1.5 inches or 3.8 centimeters. Dust the meatballs in some flour, add 2 to 3 tablespoons of olive oil to a saute pan, put it over medium to medium-high heat, and then throw them in. When you place the meatballs into the saute pan, don't overcrowd them, and you also want them to sizzle. If it's not sizzling, they'll just sit there and absorb that oil, and you definitely don't want oily meatballs. Alright, so the goal here is not to cook the meatballs all the way through. You're just sauteing it, getting a little bit of brownness on all of the sides to seal in that flavor so that you can have a nice juicy meatball. After you've sauteed the meatballs, place them in a dish on the side, get them ready for the delicious sauce we're going to make, but check it out, 20 delicious loaded meatballs. Now that the meatballs are cooked, it's time to degrease the pan, so remove the grease. So let's begin this homemade tomato sauce recipe. So the fond right there, those brown bits, you want to have as much of that in the pan as possible. That fond is flavor, and that's going to be the base flavor for our tomato sauce. Over medium heat, add 2 to 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And then add our onions. We're using 1 large yellow onion, or about 180 grams, and 1/3 of a carrot, or roughly about 13 grams. I like to use the carrot in my tomato sauce recipe. It adds a little bit of sweetness. Instead of putting a little bit of sugar in to offset the acidity, I just like to use the carrot. It kind of does the same thing, and it's a natural flavor. It just tastes really good. So now it's time to saute the vegetables. You want them to become nice and translucent. At the same time, use a flat bottom spatula. Scrape the bottom of the saute pan, the sides, release that fond. You want that fond to be incorporated into the sauce. Once the onions and the carrots are just about done being sauteed, it's time to add the garlic. Take 2 cloves of roughly chopped garlic, add it to the saute pan. Saute this for around 30 seconds to about a minute. At the tail end of our sauteing process, we're going to throw in 1/4 of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes and 1/4 of a teaspoon of celery seed. This will help bring out those flavors with a little bit of that heat before we put in the tomatoes. Okay, so our vegetables are looking great. We've sauteed them. We've added a few spices. Now for this homemade sauce, we're going to put in some crushed tomatoes. Add 2 28-ounce cans, roughly about 1,600 grams. And there are so many delicious ways to make spaghetti and meatballs. I mean, there's so many different types of recipes for this, and I'm sure that there's a lot of different families that have it passed down from generation to generation with a wide variety of different techniques and different ingredients. But this is how I like to make my spaghetti and meatball sauce recipe. How do you like to make your homemade spaghetti and meatball recipe? Leave a comment below, let us know. Make sure you give the sauce a little bit of a stir. You want to incorporate all those ingredients, and we are over low to medium heat. We want to bring this to a little simmer. Then add 2 bay leaves. I like to use basil in my tomato sauce. At the very end, I'll place the leaves, chop them up nice and fine, and put them into the sauce as a finishing touch. But for right now, I'll take that stem, throw it into the sauce, and let it infuse its flavor into this delicious tomato sauce. Alright, so now that it's simmering, you can put it on low. Grab that lid, cover it up. You're going to cook this and reduce it down for 45 minutes. You're going to want to intermittently check it. Give it a little bit of a stir. Make sure it has enough liquid. You can always add a little bit of water if there's not enough liquid. The goal here is to reduce this for 45 minutes to kind of incorporate all those vegetables. Let them break down. Let them bring out their flavors. Let those spices just kind of accentuate themselves into the sauce. So it's been 45 minutes. The tomatoes, they've broken down. The vegetables, they've started to melt into the sauce. It's liquidy, it's bubbly. All of the deliciousness has fused together. It just looks really great. I like the sauce for my homemade spaghetti and meatballs to be smooth, so I'm going to take an immersion blender and I'm going to smooth it out. But before I do so, I need to remove those bay leaves as well as the basil stem. Now you don't have to blend the sauce. You can leave it chunky if you like, taster's choice, however you like it, but I prefer to have my spaghetti and meatball sauce. I like the sauce to be a little bit smooth. If you want a nice smooth sauce and you don't have an immersion blender, you can use a regular blender. Just make sure that you cool the sauce down before you blend it. You don't want that sauce, because it's hot, to pop that blender top off and to scald you. Alright, so everything's coming together real nicely. So we finished our tomato sauce. We have the meatballs ready. Now it's time to throw it all together. So put that burner over medium heat. We want the sauce to start to come to a simmer. We don't want to boil it, but we want to bring it back up to heat. And while it's coming back up to heat, gently place those meatballs into that sauce. Arrange them as best as you can. Perfect, so the meatballs are in. Grab a spoon. We want to start putting sauce on top of those meatballs. Start flipping them over, put the sauce all around them. We want those meatballs to be submerged in that sauce. And once the sauce starts to simmer, turn it down to low, cover it up. The goal here is to simmer this for roughly about 45 minutes to an hour. Occasionally open it up, check for the liquid level, make sure that it doesn't need any more liquid. You'll also want to grab a spatula or a spoon and start to shimmy those meatballs around. You want to mix them up so that they can get well incorporated into that sauce. And you can give the pot a little bit of a shimmy. That helps keep those meatballs submerged and helps them to stay nice and moist and incorporate themselves into that sauce. Alright, so it's the moment of truth. It's been 1 hour. Check it out. The sauce has been simmering ever so slightly with those meatballs. The meatballs have been releasing their flavors. The sauce is becoming nice and thick. It's smooth. It looks absolutely perfect. So take a look at the meatball. It's big, it's plump, it's retained its shape. It has all of the flavors of the garlic, the onions, the parsley. It's rich, it's hearty, it's delicious. Check that deep, dark red color out on that homemade tomato sauce. It's fully packed with flavors from the vegetables, the meatballs, the spices. It's all just concentrated in there. But it's not over yet, so hold on to your hats. We have a little bit more to add. We have some fine, fresh herbs, so the rest of that flat-leafed Italian parsley, sprinkle it on in. Same thing with the basil. We saved those leaves, chopped them up, and here we go. We're throwing them in at the end. We're going to turn off the heat. You don't really want to cook this too much. If you cook it too much, these leaves will turn brown. You don't want that. You want them to retain their beautiful green color. You'll also want to give the sauce a little bit of a taste so you can adjust the seasoning. You might need to add a little bit more salt. You might want to throw in a little bit pepper, but just season it to taste. And now it's time to plate it on up. Grab a few of those loaded meatballs, some of that delicious tomato sauce, throw it over some spaghetti. And hey, if you want to make some meatball subs, go ahead and grab some subs, throw a few large meatballs on it, smother it with that sauce, throw some mozzarella on it, and knock yourself out with a meatball sub. So there you have it, spaghetti and meatballs, a comfort food classic. Go on out, give it a shot, come on back, tell us what you think, and if you have any tricks of the trade or if there are any special ingredients that you like to put into your spaghetti and meatball sauce, drop a comment below and let everybody know. Well, thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this spaghetti and meatball recipe with the loaded meatballs. Don't forget to share with your friends, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and to remember, as always, live, love, and make gravy.